Happy Halloween, everyone, and in honor of this spooky holiday, I come to you with another scary story. If you know me in real life, or if you've been around on this channel long enough, you will know that I am a huge fan of cosmic horror, or horror that centers around these larger-than-life malevolent forces, beings that are beyond our understanding and our comprehension. I've discussed examples of cosmic horror on this very channel in the past. For example, last Halloween I did a video covering The Lighthouse, which is a great example of a cosmic horror filmed within the Hollywood context. I even have a couple short films on this very channel that deal with the same concept of eldritch beings that are beyond our understanding. And if you want to watch those, the links are in the description. To me, cosmic horror is infinitely more terrifying and infinitely more fascinating than other examples of horror from the modern age. It is not only the fear of the unknown, but the knowledge that the unknown is vast and it's out to get you. And this Halloween, I wanted to talk to you all about a project here on YouTube that fits this description perfectly, and that is the short horror film Portrait of God. If you are like me and you really enjoy the horror scene here on YouTube, then you may have come across this film in the past. Portrait of God was made and directed by filmmaker Dylan Clark and posted onto his YouTube channel of the same name, as well as on his Vimeo. It is 7.5 minutes long, and the entire experience is nothing short of dreadful, but in a good way. And the way that the film is advertised in the description is: a religious girl prepares a presentation about a painting titled Portrait of God. What she sees challenges her beliefs. This film really plays on the concept of perspective. We, as the audience, are shown things at the exact same rate that the protagonist of the short film is. This gives you an amazing real-time insight into her experience. Yet at the same time, we are privy to knowledge that this protagonist does not possess, which makes the whole experience of watching this film very fearful and very dreadful, as we are forced to watch helplessly as she stumbles into nightmares that she was not prepared for. Spoiler alert, it's not God. Probably. Today, I'm going to go over the events of the film with you and give my own personal theory into the great mystery that comes out of this short film, and that is, what is the Portrait of God? Now, obviously, this is your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the film for yourself, the link to it is in the description. I highly encourage you to watch it yourself before watching this video. However, if you usually tend to watch videos like this before deciding if a short film or a piece of content is worth your time, or if you are not the biggest horror fan and so you consume videos like this rather than exposing yourself to stuff that can potentially give you nightmares, then this is the video for you, and we are going to get into it right away. Additionally, I also encourage you to check out the behind-the-scenes video on Dylan Clark's YouTube channel, where he goes over aspects of the production, the making of this film, and going over the contributions of the cast and the crew into making this masterpiece come to life. I am pulling some of the facts that you will hear in this video from his account that he gives in his behind-the-scenes video, but there is so much more content in that video for you to absorb if you are interested. So with all that said, thank you so much for sticking around, and we're gonna get into the video. But first, a word from our sponsor. I'm on a mission to make content creation my job, and to do that, I need your help. In the description, there is a link to my Patreon where you can support me in exchange for benefits, as well as a link to my Twitch channel where you can support me through subscriptions and bits, as well as a PayPal if you're feeling generous. Thanks for listening to my speech, and we're gonna get back to the video. The short film begins with a verse from the book of Exodus in the biblical Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible to some. And that passage is Exodus chapter 33 verse 20, where God says, "And no man shall see me and live." This immediately sets the tone for a short film entitled Portrait of God. We are then introduced to the character and the setting for our short film. We are shown our protagonist Mia Riley, who is played to absolute perfection by actor and screenwriter Sydney Brumfield. She is alone in a dimly lit projector room. The entire short film that we are about to watch will take place in this physical space. This is a particularly great trick for indie filmmakers who are operating with a very limited budget. Dylan has managed to take an empty projector room and a single character and turn it into an absolute masterpiece in horror. Mia is practicing for an upcoming presentation she is giving on the painting titled Portrait of God. She pulls out some cue cards that have the script for her presentation and sets the timer on her phone to time how long that her presentation will take. And her presentation gives us a glimpse into the lore of this fictional painting. She changes the slide on her presentation to an empty black screen. This is the painting. She explains that many who look at this painting see just that, an empty black screen. But others who have looked at the painting Portrait of God swear that they can make out features in the darkness. And this in itself is not entirely unusual. Us humans are very prone to tricking our brains into seeing something that isn't there. However, from the audio logs that Mia has gathered of people who have observed a figure in this painting, their accounts or descriptions of the person in the painting are all strikingly similar. And the voice actors for this sequence are fantastic as well. Dylan Clark shouts them out in his behind the scenes video. He sourced all of them from Fiverr. And they really nail this haunting aspect of this painting that appears blank to most people, but some do see something in this painting. And whatever the people are seeing in this painting, they can all agree on what it looks like.
It's a man, or close to a man.
Wrinkled, skinny.
Really skinny.
He looks skinny. He's smiling.
He's grinning.
The figure resembles a human male, at least for the most part. The figure is very wrinkled and extremely skinny, and it has a very large smile. While some of the people giving their accounts say that this smile is very benevolent and compassionate, others say that its grin is unsettling and impossibly wide. The eyes of this figure are large, with a glint of light in them. While some interpret this as compassion, others interpret it as being very unnerving. There is a little bit of a divide as to whether this figure seems benevolent or unsettling, and I think the last three accounts that she plays really sums that up perfectly.
Of course it's frightening. That kind of power should be. I don't like looking at it. I don't like it.
It's beautiful.
A very eerie element about this painting, the Portrait of God, even though we only see a black screen, is that everyone who has seen something in the painting can all agree on what that something is. And we also know that while some are disturbed by the figure that they see in the painting, some are almost entranced by it. In speaking on his short film, Dylan Clark commented that he took heavy inspiration from the idea of perceiving something within the darkness, particularly how people will have different experiences in trying to interpret what is there. That plays a very key role in this film. Mia speculates that perhaps the people who are seeing a figure in this portrait are having some sort of religious experience, the implication being that God is revealing himself to these select people. And she asks the question, why is it that others can see a figure or something within this painting while her and others cannot? She stops her timer, having taken not quite 2 minutes to get through the entirety of that presentation. She then restarts her timer and begins another take. And as she backs her slides up to the beginning of her presentation, we, the audience, briefly see for a fleeting moment the portrait. And while it is mostly veiled in darkness, we can see that it matches the description that the witnesses have given. She then begins another run through of her script.
What does God look like?
However, when she gets to the slide containing the portrait itself, now again a black screen to us, she stops and pauses for a moment and begins to genuinely ponder the darkness. And as she does, she once again takes that cross necklace on her neck and holds it in her hand. And as she does, she begins to discern certain features, namely 2 bright, piercing eyes and just the glint of a shoulder. She stands completely entranced and positions herself at the front of the room, facing directly in front of this portrait. And as she does so, the image starts to become clearer. She begins to make out the form of a pale and skinny figure. The figure is seated and staring directly at the viewer, directly at Mia. She smiles, still holding that cross necklace in her hand. She now believes that, like the others, she is having a religious experience where God is revealing his form to her. We can now make out more details of the figure, namely that the eyes are impossibly large with pinpoints of light in the center, and that the grin on this creature is entirely too wide and completely toothless. Sensing that something is off, Mia staggers back and presses the button to lift the projector screen. I'm not sure why she does this, because the projector's still on, so obviously the creature is still there after she lifts it. Because, that's not how light or projectors work. She stares at the image, when suddenly the figure turns its head to stare directly at her. She immediately turns and runs out of the room, slamming the door behind her. But as soon as she slams the door, the lights go out, and suddenly she is in this vast, empty void. This sequence now takes place entirely inside of her mind. At least I believe that's what this void is meant to represent. We are in her conscience or subconscious. Hearing noises behind her, she turns and sees 2 beady eyes in the darkness. They are getting closer. And just a side note at this part, the music for this whole film, but this sequence in particular, is amazing. It's very haunting. So huge shout out to the composer Ryan Shreves for a fantastic soundtrack. Fearful, she closes her eyes and once again grips the cross in her hand and begins to pray. She begins reciting the Lord's Prayer as the figure steps closer and closer to her. And as she cowers there with her eyes closed, the figure slowly comes into view, just out of focus. And I love this because you never see in detail the features of this creature, which I really appreciate. And just another behind the scenes tidbit, this creature is played by none other than the director of this short film, Dylan Clark. Combining himself in a Halloween mask with some light makeup and a little bit of visual effects added in post, they managed to bring this creature to life in a very haunting and very amazing way. The thing reaches out with a skinny, wrinkly hand and grabs her chin, forcing her head to turn towards it. It then uses its hand to open its own mouth impossibly wide, and from within this gaping maw of a mouth, a light emerges. She opens her eyes and is immediately entranced by the light, unable to look away. She doesn't even notice that the source of that light is a terrifying creature standing in front of her. The light becomes brighter and brighter, slowly consuming her. And then we cut back to the projector room. She is staring without blinking at the screen. Her eyes are red and bloodshot, and tears are streaming down her face. Her hand is clasped tightly around the cross around her neck, but there is blood dripping down from her hand. The camera then cuts to her phone, and we realize that she has been staring at an empty screen without blinking for 3 hours. We see the screen, which has become completely black again, yet she is still standing there, unable to rip her gaze away. And as her mouth slowly twists into an unnatural smile, we cut to black. And that is the end of the short film, Portrait of God. Dylan, if you are watching this, this film is unironically my favorite short horror film of all time. It deals with concepts of horror that I love, namely cosmic horror, creatures beyond our imagination, horror with religious themes, and it does so very tastefully and very well. It's also very minimalistic. There are a total of 2 characters in one room, and yet something fantastic came from it. It even utilizes concepts that I've explored on this very channel in my own short films, but it does them so much better. So again, a huge shout out to everyone on the cast and crew who made this masterpiece come to life. And I encourage you watching this video right now to go check out his behind the scenes, his making of video for Portrait of God, where he shouts out everyone individually and goes over a lot more details that I didn't cover here. He goes over sequences that were cut from the film. He goes over different iterations of the character before they decided on the one in the film. And they even go into the combination of practical and visual effects that were used to bring this creature to life. Now, Dylan obviously left the nature of this creature intentionally vague, and I think that makes it all the more terrifying, and I think he'd agree with that. It's likely that he wrote this film completely content in not knowing the nature of the creature that he had created. However, I do have my own theory as to what the Portrait of God could be. It's not really a theory, it's more of a speculation. But I do think that the concept of this speculation is very interesting. And, shockingly, I don't think that the creature in this painting is God. My theory is that the painting known as the Portrait of God is something known as a cognitohazard. This phrase initially emerged out of the SCP community online, so if you are a big fan of SCP, you probably already know what a cognitohazard is. And for those who aren't aware, a cognitohazard refers to some form of sensory experience that causes physical or physiological damage to a person. For example, if there existed an image that anyone who looked on it would be driven insane, or a sound that if someone were to hear that sound, it would kill them instantly. Those are examples of a cognitohazard. And in the realm of the SCP Foundation, some cognitohazards are objects, some are places, some are sounds, and some are creatures. And we, the audience, are unsure of the origins of the painting Portrait of God, but I believe that Portrait of God is somehow a cognitohazardous entity. But if this theory is to be believed, then there is one problem I can think of that needs to be addressed. And that is, if this painting is a cognitohazard and therefore harmful to anyone who views it, then why is it that some people see something while others do not? And the conclusion that I came to as to my answer to this question would make this creature far more terrifying, particularly for a Christian like myself. I believe that whatever this entity is, it somehow feeds on faith. This painting is a cognitohazard, but not to people who see it, but to people who believe in it. The painting only began to affect Mia when she began reaching out to it. Being religious herself, she was trying to find God in this painting. And whatever this entity, whatever this cognitohazard is, it sensed that and reached out to her. This creature preys on a believer's desire to see God and uses that in order to feed, I guess? I'm gonna assume this creature feeds on it. Dylan made the comment in his behind the scenes video that Mia is trying to experience something that we as the audience know that she shouldn't, and her motivations for that are entirely based around her faith. And for someone like me, the idea of a creature that feeds on a person's faith is absolutely horrifying. Unless my theory is wrong, in which case I'm just scaring myself for no reason. And I know that breaking down a creature like this or a story like this can definitely ruin the magic, especially in the horror genre. But in coming up with this theory, it honestly makes the story, for me at least, even more interesting and even more horrifying. So that's my theory. Feel free to disagree or debate with me in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions, but I personally think this theory is very interesting, and I hope you found it interesting too. Dylan began his short film with a very ominous passage from the Old Testament, so I am going to close this video with my own passage from the New Testament. Specifically, John chapter 20, verse 29. Then Jesus told him, "You believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me." And this has been my Halloween special for the year. I hope you have enjoyed, and if you did, thank you so much for watching. And once again, I am going to plug Dylan Clark. His channel is in the description. He is a very talented filmmaker who deserves all the love he can get. And if you found this story interesting and want to see more of his works, then consider subscribing to his channel. He also actually just last week released his new short horror film Remains, which as of recording this video, I have not seen yet, but I am very excited to check it out. And if you enjoyed my video covering Portrait of God and discussing my theory as to what the portrait itself is, then thank you so much for watching and consider subscribing. We are just one subscriber away from 400 subscribers, and every single one of you is amazing for having supported me for this long or just joining in the support now. And I have no plans on stopping anytime soon. We are just gonna keep moving forward and keep moving upwards from here. And of course, a huge thank you goes out to the patrons who support me every month. Sean and my top tier patrons, RD and Snowy. Thank you all so much. It means the world that you are supporting me and helping me achieve my goal of being able to do this full time with you all. But with that, thank you so much for watching this Halloween video, and I will see you next week, or technically this weekend, I guess, for another video. I hope you're excited for that because I know that I am. And cut.